All right, let's talk about something that sounds kind of complicated, but is actually super important for anyone dealing with money. And let's be real, that's pretty much all of us. We're diving into the difference between real and nominal interest rates. And trust me, understanding this can totally change how you look at a loan, a mortgage, or even your savings. So let's get into it. So picture this. You walk into a bank and they offer you a loan with a 2% interest rate. I mean, that sounds amazing, right? It's a low number, seems super straightforward. But is that 2% the whole story? Is that really what you're going to end up paying? Well, as you've probably guessed, not always. And that's what brings us to what I like to call the interest rate illusion. See, the number you see on the poster or in the ad isn't always the complete picture of what your loan is going to cost you. And to see right through this illusion, you got to understand the two main types of interest rates out there, the nominal rate and the real rate. Okay, first up, let's talk about the nominal interest rate. Honestly, the best way to think about this is like the sticker price on a car. It's the simple, advertised price you see right up front. No tricks, no hidden clauses. It's the number they tell you. So what is it exactly? Well, a nominal interest rate is just a fixed rate. It's not tied to whatever's going on with inflation or the economy. If the bank says the rate is 5%, you pay 5%. That's it. End of story. It's a simple, predictable number that isn't going to change. Now, let's flip the coin and look at the other side, the real interest rate. If the nominal rate is that sticker price, you should think of the real rate as the true cost of borrowing. This is where things start to get a little more interesting. The huge difference here, the absolute key, is that this rate is linked to the Consumer Price Index, which is just the official way we measure inflation. And that means a real interest rate isn't a fixed number. Nope, it's actually a moving target that goes up and down with the cost of living. So let's look at how this actually works, using that 2% example from the beginning. If you have a 2% real interest rate, you don't just pay 2%. You start with that 2% base rate, but then you have to add the current rate of inflation on top of it. So your total cost is constantly changing as the economy changes. And that brings us to the secret ingredient, the hidden factor that changes everything: inflation. That's the thing that separates a simple nominal rate from a more complex real rate. It's this invisible force that can totally alter the true cost of your loan over time. So let's just put them head to head to make it crystal clear. The nominal rate, that's the simple, advertised rate. It has nothing to do with the price index. It's basically what you see is what you get. But the real rate, that's the rate after you factor in inflation. It's directly tied to the price index. It's not what you see, it's what you truly pay. Okay, so theory is one thing, but why does any of this actually matter for you and your wallet? Well, knowing the difference here is absolutely crucial when you're making big financial moves, whether you're buying a house, getting a car loan, or even just picking a savings account. Check this out. At first glance, a 5% nominal rate loan seems way more expensive than a 2% real rate loan, right? But what if inflation is at 3%? Well, suddenly that 2% real rate becomes 2% plus that 3% for inflation, which is 5%. They actually end up costing the exact same amount. The really important difference isn't the final number in this one case, it's about predictability. With the nominal loan, your cost is fixed. With the real loan, your cost could go up or down depending on what inflation does next. So if you only take one thing away from all of this, let it be this. The next time you're offered a loan or any kind of interest rate, just ask one simple question. Is this rate linked to the price index or not? The answer to that question tells you everything you need to know about the real deal. So there you have it. You now have the key to see right through that interest rate illusion. You know that the sticker price isn't always a true cost. And with that knowledge, you're way better prepared to handle your financial future. The only question left is, how are you going to use it? Hey everyone, and welcome! Today we're going to crack the code on economic growth. You know all those big numbers you hear on the news? We're going to peel back the layers and find out what's really going on with the economy. All right, let's kick things off with a puzzle, one that economists spend a lot of time thinking about. And on the surface, it seems pretty simple, but the answer really gets to a fundamental truth about how money actually works. I mean, on the surface, this looks like a total no-brainer, right? Imagine you've got a ton of cash. You could earn 3% here in the US, or you could get 4.5% over in Israel. Why wouldn't you just move the money and take that extra profit? Well, it's not that simple, because the final outcome depends on other huge factors like shifting exchange rates, and the big one we're diving into today, inflation. So this naturally leads us to the most common economic number you'll ever hear about, gross domestic product, or GDP. It's the headline figure, right? It's what everyone uses to measure a country's economic performance. But to really get it, we've got to look a little closer at how it's put together. It's actually a really direct measurement. You just take the total quantity of everything a country produced in 1 year, every single car, every cup of coffee, all the software, and you multiply it by the price it sold for in that exact same year. Pretty straightforward. Okay, let's make this real. Imagine a super simple economy that only makes two things, product A and product B. Here we've got the price and the quantity for 3 years in a row. Now, using just this, we can start to build a story. Let's calculate the nominal GDP for each year and see what that story looks like. So, for 2001, here's what we do. We multiply 900 units of product A by its price of $30, and we add that to 192 units of product B at $100 each. That gives us a total economic output, or nominal GDP, of $46,200. That's our starting line. Now, let's jump forward to 2002. We do the exact same math, but with 2002's prices and quantities. And look at that. The number jumps up to $51,400. Wow, okay. That looks like some pretty healthy growth, doesn't it? And then we get to 2003. Using that year's numbers, our economy's value has shot up again, this time all the way to $58,300. The story seems crystal clear. This economy is absolutely booming. And this chart just paints the perfect picture, doesn't it? A steady, impressive climb, year after year. If you were a politician, you'd be shouting this number from the rooftops. But is this really the whole story? Okay, but hold on a second. Let's look a little closer, because that beautiful upward sloping graph, well, it might just be hiding something really important. It could be creating a bit of an illusion. This is it. This is the absolute key question we have to ask. Remember, GDP is just price times quantity, so the number can go up for two very different reasons. One, because we're actually making more stuff, or two, simply because the price of everything went up due to inflation. So how much of that growth was actually real? So to find the truth, to separate the real production from just simple price hikes, we need a different kind of tool. We need to strip away all the effects of inflation and find what's called the real GDP. The secret ingredient here is using what we call constant prices. So instead of using the prices from the current year, we pick 1 year to be our benchmark, our base year, and we use its prices to measure the output of all the other years. This basically neutralizes the effect of inflation. So here's the crucial part. To find the real GDP for 2002, we take the quantities from 2002, but we multiply them by the prices from our base year, 2001. We're essentially asking, what would our 2002 production have been worth if prices hadn't changed since 2001? And the answer is $50,000. And there it is. Now we can finally see the full picture. The blue bars, that's the nominal GDP. That's the illusion. The orange bars, that's the real GDP. That's the reality. See, there's still growth, but it's much, much more modest. A huge chunk of that impressive jump we saw before wasn't because we were making more stuff. It was just inflation, making everything more expensive. Now look, this is an incredibly powerful tool for comparing growth from 1 year to the next. But it's not perfect. It's got some pretty big limits, especially when you try to compare economies over very long stretches of time. Just think about it for a second. How could you possibly compare today's economy to the economy of, say, 1980, using 1980 prices? The problem isn't just that prices have changed. The products themselves are completely different because of technology. What's the 1980 price for an AI assistant or a Netflix subscription? The question doesn't even make sense. Okay, but here's where it gets really cool. Understanding the difference between nominal and real GDP doesn't just give us a much clearer picture of economic growth, it actually gives us a brand new way to measure inflation itself. You see, by comparing the illusion, the nominal GDP, to the reality, the real GDP, we can perfectly isolate the effect of those price changes. That gap between those two numbers, that's what gives us a powerful measure of inflation across the entire economy. This gives economists another vital tool in their toolbox. You've probably heard of the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, which tracks the prices of things we all buy. Well, the GDP deflator is another key measure that looks at the price of everything produced in the economy. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that the difference between nominal and real isn't just some boring academic definition. No way. It is the fundamental difference between seeing a financial illusion and understanding the actual, tangible health of an economy. So the next time you hear someone on the news going on about economic growth, what's the first question you're going to ask? Is that growth nominal or is it real? Because now you have the tools to see right past the illusion. Thanks for joining this explainer. You ever get that feeling? You look at your bills, your grocery receipt, and you just know things are getting more expensive. But then you see the official inflation numbers, and they seem kind of low. Well, if that sounds familiar, you're not alone. It's this weird paradox, and today we're going to figure out why your gut and the data don't always agree. So what's the deal here? Why does it feel like everything costs more, but the official index just doesn't seem to reflect that reality? To crack this mystery, we've got to first pull back the curtain and see what the officials are actually measuring. All right, so the main tool that governments and central banks use to track all this is something called the Consumer Price Index. You've probably heard of it as the CPI. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like the country's official shopping list. And the idea is actually pretty simple. The Central Bureau of Statistics basically puts together this big imaginary basket of goods and services. You know, stuff that a typical family would buy. Then they just track how the average price of everything in that basket changes over time. It's really just a snapshot of our collective spending habits. So what's actually in this basket? Well, it's pretty much all the big-ticket items you'd expect. We're talking about housing, things like rent and maintenance, transportation, so fuel for your car or public transit tickets. Of course, food and drinks are in there, healthcare, and even things like education and culture. It's really meant to cover the whole spectrum of our daily costs. And, you know, this basket isn't just set in stone. It can't be, right? It has to evolve with the times. So every few years, it gets an update to reflect how we're actually living. Think about it. A decade or so ago, a Netflix subscription probably wasn't in there. But now, for a lot of us, that's a standard monthly expense. Same goes for high-speed internet. Okay, but here's where the plot thickens. This is where that paradox we talked about really starts to make sense. See, not everything in that big consumer basket is created equal. The prices don't all move in the same direction. There's a hidden story here, and you find it when you split the basket into two very different categories. All right, so on one side, you've got your imported goods. Think fashion, electronics, computers, all that stuff. Because of global competition and super efficient manufacturing, the prices for these things have actually been going down over time. But then on the other side, you have local services. These are the things you just can't import, right? Like your rent, municipal taxes, electricity, water. And the prices for these things, they tend to go up steadily. And here it is. This is the key. When the CPI averages all of this stuff together, those falling prices on a new TV or a pair of jeans can literally hide or mask the very real price hikes on your rent or your electricity bill. So one category is dropping, the other is climbing, and the average number, it might barely budge. But let me ask you, which one of those changes do you really feel in your bank account each month? And this isn't just some abstract economic theory, right? This has a very, very real impact on people. It means that families who spend most of their income on the absolute essentials, we're talking food, housing, utilities, they're the ones who feel that financial squeeze the most. I mean, cheaper electronics are great, but they don't help much when a huge chunk of your paycheck is just trying to keep up with the rising cost of the basics. So to try and get a clearer picture of what's happening, economists have another tool they can use. It's called the GDP Deflator. Sounds a bit technical, but really it's just a different way of measuring the economy, and it looks at things from a slightly different angle. The key word to focus on here is domestically. That's the whole game changer. See, unlike the CPI, which tracks all the stuff we consume, no matter where it comes from, the GDP deflator only measures the price changes of goods and services that we produce right here at home. So let's just break that down. The CPI, that's our consumer basket, and it absolutely includes imported goods. But the GDP deflator, that measures everything our country produces, and it specifically excludes imports. And that one little difference, well, it's everything. What this means is that by taking those cheaper imported goods out of the equation, the GDP deflator can actually give us a much sharper picture of the price pressures happening right here in our own backyard. It zeroes in on the cost changes for local stuff like housing and services, the very things we tend to feel the most. Okay, so this is all interesting theory, but why does any of this actually matter to you, to your wallet? Well, it's because one of these numbers, the CPI, has a direct and really powerful impact on your personal finances. Think of it like a chain reaction or a set of dominoes. First, the official consumer price index goes up. That gets the central bank worried about inflation getting out of control. So, to cool things down, what do? They raise interest rates. And boom, the final domino falls. Your mortgage, your car loan, any credit you have, it all just got more expensive. And there's actually a target they're aiming for. The Bank of Israel, for example, wants to keep annual inflation somewhere in that 1 to 3% range. And their number one tool for keeping it in that sweet spot? You guessed it, messing with the interest rates. So here's the bottom line. Even with all its quirks, even with this whole paradox we've been talking about, the CPI is the number that matters most to the people making the big decisions. It is the single most important metric that shapes the monetary policy that ends up affecting every single one of us. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. When the official, all averaged out number doesn't match what you're actually experiencing day to day, which price changes are truly shaping your financial reality? Is it the falling price of a new gadget, or is it the rising cost of simply keeping a roof over your head?